Hi, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. Today, lecture is about one of the most fascinating, beautiful art form that I know, um, the jazz, which was, of course, established in your continent and your country, where I was born as well, the United States of America. Um, and the lecture doesn't deal with jazz as itself, but the Arabic influences on the Israeli jazz scene, which is extremely developed. However, I wouldn't like to speak about those elements before I say something very superficial but needed about the jazz itself, so we can all connect with the vibe and the energy of that art form, which is incredibly beautiful and wild. So let's begin with our presentation. And here is Yaakov Gershowitz, who actually was born in 1898 in Brooklyn and stayed there till he died in 1937. And his original name tells us that he was very much Jewish from Russia. Later on, was called George Gershwin. George Gershwin is maybe the most important figure when we speak about jazz, who not only contributed to this art form, but actually, in my eyes at least, established it. Now, George Gershwin was a pianist who came from Russia, from Jewish family, who ran away from those horrible times in the end of the 19th century. There was a huge wave of immigration to America, to the States, and he grew up in this society of Jews who were quite cultured and scholared, and he came from classical music. But growing up in Brooklyn, he was extremely curious about the roots of where he's actually lived. Um, and we can see that he was very much curious about what we now cannot say, but was back then called the Negro culture. And instead of just being in the classical halls of the classical music, of piano, which he was playing since he was, I think, 13, he actually visited places like Harlem and New Orleans and other quarters and neighborhoods and areas of American Black areas, and he wanted to learn about their culture and their music and their vibes and their energy and their rhythm. And he actually taught himself that culture of blues and jazz that was very much Black. On this right, we can see the shtetl where he came from in his origins. And this shtetl also plays part in jazz. If we listen to jazz from the beginning of the 20th century and up till the mid of it, we can notice that the clarinet plays quite a big of a deal there. The clarinet is very much connected with the shtetl music and culture, very much of a Jewish instrument. What I call this three picture down here is like the three the very sacred triangle that I like is that aesthetic knowledge, that curiosity and freedom, they all together actually combine into improvisation, which is extremely important in jazz culture. What else? Other things that are very important when we speak about jazz and improvisation, that they also connect with classical music. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, they were all big improvisers, and it's very well much established in the classical music world. Up till recently, composers were extremely very good and capable improvisers, and that also exists in the jazz world. Now, George Gershwin was extremely wild and independent in his thought. One of his most important quotes is written right here: "Jazz is the voice of the American soul. The Negro music of America is the foundation of our national music. I think it's a very, very important, crucial, I would say, quote by Gershwin, who long before anybody thought about the politically correct um, and various of different people and not caring about race and everything, he really was genuinely curious and intrigued about the Black people, who for him were the Native Americans. And he sat in churches and he sat in the streets and he listened to spirituals and gospels and the blues and the whole slave culture that was extremely, extremely developed. And he thought, wow, I have to make something out of it because the roots of the American soul, not only culture, but soul, is laid there. And he used this richness of the Black music and combined it with what he knew, which was his Russian classical roots, with the shtetl, you can say the shtetl kind of element. And the three of them actually, I can say a little bit superficially, created what we nowadays can call jazz. So before we dive into those Arabic influences, I would like for us to just pay a great respect for this huge, very important man, and to listen to him play. So that was our hero, George Gershwin, playing his standard I Got Rhythm. I won't say much about theory because it's really not the forum, but I do have to mention, because it will be important for us later, that mainly in jazz, mainly, not always, also in classical music, it happens quite a lot, that composers have a theme and then they improvise on it. And that's a very, very typical frame of the jazz standard as well. And we will later on see it with our friends, Israeli jazz players as well. So I would like to present our first Israeli pianist. Disclosure, we grew up together in Jerusalem, uh, same ear training classes. We hated each other most of the time because we competed. Um, but I have to admit that Omri Mo, the pianist and the jazz player, is a really, really brilliant musician. And I allow myself to say a genius. And he's much, much, much more accomplished than I am. And he is really one of the most, I think, significant voices of artists and not only musicians, our time. I would like us to meet him, and he will speak in the next video about his influences, and I think we'll be able to see the connection between the way he thinks about life and music and how George Gershwin thought about them as well.
My name is Omri Moore. I'm a piano player I play jazz, classical music, Arabo-Andalusian music, Sha'bi, and all kinds of related styles. I started to play the piano following my older brother, Roy, who is playing also keyboard. When I was about 7 years old, he was almost 4 years older than me. He started to play, and I follow his steps, and that's how I became a piano player. I came across Moroccan and Algerian music first through my mentor Nino Biton, who is a oud master, violin, and a singer, and I learned with him since I was about 14 years old. Then I also met Maurice El Mediouni, who just passed away recently, and I had the chance and the privilege to play with him a few times. Both of them are very dear teachers who I had the privilege to study with them. With El Mediouni, I got inspired from him, from his work, and through Nino, I was a direct student of him. I used to come almost every week to his house and learning music. Me myself, I have the great privilege of playing in a band with drummer Karim Ziad and the singer and gimbri player Mehdi Nasuli. It's called the trio Asala. We're very happy to see each other every time and play together. And for me, music is definitely the best way to connect with people and to bridge over religion and borders and almost everything. It's a very natural and a language which speaks directly to the heart and bypasses other barriers. My knowledge about jazz music and music in general from him. And also, around the same age, I studied with the late Professor Benjamin Oren, who was my mentor for European classical music.
So in order to save some time, I had to cut things through, but I hope you could manage to see that the influences of Omri Mor were both jazz, very local Jerusalem teachers that he met, classical musicians that he met, and eventually he wanted to combine all of them in order to see something whole and not to stay in this classical music ghetto that most of us classical musicians tend to be in. And I have to say, and I can testify, that when I was like playing Chopin and singing Mendelssohn and Schubert, Omri Mo, when we were like 13 or 14 or 15, he used to go around and just walk around Jerusalem streets, especially to Nachlaot, a neighborhood in which you can find Jews from the East. And he used to go there and to listen to them hours and hours and to spend a lot of time with them. And he was generally curious about things that weren't the most natural thing and immediate thing for him. I do also have to mention that Omri Mor roots are half Iraqi. So maybe he did have something at home, but in our school and our environment, the way of thinking was extremely Western. From Omri, I would like to jump to Avishai Cohen. We will go back to Omri later on. Just a second, I'm sorry. It is Omri Mor, I'm sorry. We're going to listen to him in Krakow. And I spoke about the theme and the improvisation. We're going to see Omri Mor in Krakow Jazz Jewish Festival, playing with his ensemble there. And first 3 minutes, it's going to be a little bit longer. I have to do that because the theme is longer. But you're going to watch Omri Mor plays a theme that is Arabic, not very Western, has to do with the East. And after that, they will improvise on that very theme and it will sound something completely Western, yet a little bit Eastern. Let's listen to it. Okay, I have to end it, although it's beautiful, and I'm sorry to do this. We just don't have the whole time, but you will get all the links and everything. So I hope you were able to feel the transition between the Andalusian music, which was a little bit Spanish and had the North African vibe combined with the South Spanish tradition. And then after only counts one, two, three, the whole jam gets into the picture and start going wild and playing with that theme, but in a very American way, you can say, or more like traditional jazz way. I never know how non-musicians can listen to things and how your ears are exactly. So if something is not that clear, please raise your hand or send me a question or something. Um, we'll move from Omri Mo, the pianist, to another Israeli star named Avishai Cohen. There are actually two Avishai Cohen who are very much famous. One is the contrabass player, and one is the trumpet player. Both are really, they made history. Um, we'll jump to Avishai Cohen encore that he gives with an orchestra. Let's see, I can bet that you will feel that it's not very Western. Improvisation. I hope you agree with me that it's like one of the most joyful things on earth. Um, so full of life, so vivid, so energetic, and that's one of the things that defines Avishai Cohen. Um, from that energy that I think everybody can hear that is non-Western, we'll jump to something else. I used to lecture about it for 1 hour because this song can really host something very long. It's called Shir al Etz, and I'll play it for you with Avishai Cohen as well. We continue with him. Shir al Etz is a song about a tree, and it was written in Israel, in Hebrew. The text is very, very Israeli. Um, but Avishai does here something interesting. He takes that Israeli children actually song and recompose it, rearrange it, and he adds an oud, a very Arabic instrument that we'll meet later on as well. And allegedly, by using the oud and doing nothing else other than that, and not having other Arabic elements, is not such a big of a mission. However, how you do it, when you do it, the delicacy in which Avishai uses here is really, really a summit of this togetherness, if I can say, of all those elements that I mentioned earlier when I talked about Gershwin. You use something that is very Israeli and you add to it something that has another color from another world that comes from the desert with all its baggage, which is very, very rich. And when you use it after playing the theme, and then you add this other color, it suddenly becomes something completely else. Allegedly, it's easy and simple, but in this case, it's simply a masterpiece. let's hear it. Please notice that the beginning is the theme played by Shai Maestro on the piano, and later on with Avishai Cohen on the bass, and then the oud will take the lead. The oud. Okay. I had to end it, unfortunately. But I hope you could hear this beautiful authenticity of the oud just merging in together with something that originally was composed by a very, very Ashkenazi Jew, by the way, who came from Russia as well. So here is another example of just using another sound from another way of life, from another world, and merging it so beautifully with something completely else. We'll keep on with another jazz player whom I really, really appreciate, Yonatan Avishai. As you can notice, Avishai is a very common name for jazz players in Israel, and you have to own that name in order to become one, maybe. Yonatan Avishai also is a very talented pianist. He's ensembled a new group of jazz players recently in Tel Aviv, and we'll hear a flute playing there, imitating also sounds from the desert. This piece called Bedouin Roots. So let's listen to another use of an Arabic instrument transparent here. So this is actually an imitation, an imitation of a ney, which is a desert flute. very, very common in Bedouin music, in Arabic music. It's built a little bit different, but very similar. We can say it's the Eastern flute. So that was another example of other uses of actually Western instruments disguising to something else. We'll continue with Omer Avital and Avishai Cohen in their standards called the Abutbus. Omer Avital is another bass player who made a huge career in New York, based in New York today as well. We studied together for our BA degree together in Jerusalem. And he's also a brilliant, brilliant musician. Let's hear him.
We have one more for you. This one is in a Moroccan Sha'bi style, and it's called the Abud Bulls.
And it's getting more and more and more and more wild and fascinating. People are declared ecstatic there. I hope you could listen the way that they build it. Practically, they keep on doing not the same thing, but the structure is quite similar. They presenting something, they presenting a theme, they improvise it a little bit, like they do in the imam, like they do in the Arabic churches, yes. And then they build it and they build it and they build it, and then they start to break like a new theme, which is more wild, more free, more American with the other instruments. And then we could see also Avishai Cohen, the trumpet player, who's also a big, big, big star in that scene. Made a huge, huge, huge career all over the world. And they had a very nice ensemble that played together with a very good saxophone player from the States, whom I forgot his name, I'm sorry, and Jonathan Avishai again on the piano. So those people actually made quite a history, I allow myself to say. They took what George Gershwin said back then in the beginning of the other century, and they keep on doing the same thing. They keep on searching. They keep on looking for a new inspiration, for a new route, for a new something to rely on and to combine with and to create something new. They keep on renewing themselves. They never just lay back on their very good reputation and career and just sit there and redo the same thing. No, they keep on searching and exploring. And this kind of character is very much, I think, is a continuation of our George Gershwin. And therefore, I share this huge respect with them. We'll keep on, by the way, I forgot to say, the name, the Abutbuls of the last video that we just watched, Abutbul is actually a surname from Morocco, North Africa. And Avital, when you hear the surname Avital, like Omer Avital, actually it was, it means that originally they came from Morocco and that their original name is Abutbul. So every time you see Omer Avital and other people like that, just know that originally their father came from Morocco. And when they call their song the Abutbuls, they want to call back on their roots and their origin and pay respect to where their family came from. We'll continue with Omer Klein, another huge star in that scene, with his trio when they share respect to Tunisia.
We have one more for you.
I'm sorry. And here's the American jazz. I'm really sorry that I have to cut it like this, but it's unbelievable. I mean, it's so naughty of Omer to just cut off this whole Eastern world and just like that, just do this shift to something so American, so naughty from another century. And it was just like as if you could, as if you walked into a bar in New York in the 1936 or so and just listened to a very solid jazz player playing there. And this transition, those shifts, this is something is very, very, very sweet, I find, and very and very reviving. It's something else. Let's see, I can do this and I can do that and I can fly from here to there like this. And there is something very, very nice about it in my taste. We'll end this exhibition of those, in my eyes, legendary musicians. I think it's a summit of the whole thing. We'll take a look at Omer Avital, the bass player from New York, in a clip from a radio explaining, not explaining, but actually showing also a Yemenite part of his playing. So it was like the village, yeah, the jazz village, the very formal, like one of the places of the jazz, if not the, presenting Omar Avital doing his very New Yorker jazz, and just running from this New Yorker jazz to this Yemenite song, and then to Muhammad's Market. And if you look at it, there is something very, very fascinating. I feel in the way that when you go back to Yemenite song and you go back to North Africa, Morocco and Tunisia and all those African countries, they were the roots of the black people who came from Africa to New Orleans, to Harlem. And when Omer Avital and Avishai Cohen and the other Avishai Cohen and Omer Klein, all those Israeli guys who mostly came from Europe, actually go back or look around them, they find themselves going back to the very origin of what George Gershwin found in Harlem. So it all, like history, finds itself together after 1 century or more, and I find it very, very moving, I have to say. We don't have much more time. I would like to say that in Israel, I don't want to get into the political situation here and the interests and the conflicts and everything. But I do want to say that as an artistic director, as a soprano, as an orchestral conductor, when I offered the Israeli TV program that will take care of those elements and will focus on those different cultures, they look to as if I was an alien. So I managed to do it in other platforms till I managed to found the radio station that was the place to form a music station. But before that, it was quite impossible. What I've done some projects that merged kids from Arabic areas in Israel and Jewish areas in Israel, and they learn together literature and theater monologues and dance and music. And I also had this series in the a very underground TV station. I'd like us to just have a glimpse on that so we can see what I'm talking about. He'll build a little home just meant for two, from which I'll never roam. But what would you? And so would also go. I'm waiting for
תודה, זה ממש נגע ללב, באמת.
תודה רבה. אז הנה, זה אווירה אחרת לחלוטין של אותו סולם. אנחנו בהקשר הזה אולי יותר חופשיים, אבל בהיבטים אחרים אתם הרבה יותר מסוגלנים מאיתנו. משהו. זה היה בלוז ערבי בהתחלה.
כן, זהו, אז זה כאילו, זה כל מיני סגנונות שנכנסו פה.
אלמנטים אמריקאים מובהקים.
כן, כן, כן.
יפה. So it was just a glimpse to something that I wanted to show, where I actually took Gershwin, our Gershwin standard, and I sang it to George Kandelaf, the oud player, and he used the same standard and improvised on it and used the same scale, and we talked about it and we analyzed it, and of course I cannot show you the whole thing because we don't have the time, but because I cannot and I don't presume to sing Arabic music, I was looking for something that was a common ground between the two different worlds. And I did it with the skills that I had, and my other colleagues from the jazz, who are much more accomplished than I am on that aspect, did it in other, with their skills. But I think that's the bottom line here that connects all of us together, and I hope relates us with George Gershwin, is the willing to find a common ground and the willing to see whether or not we can understand each other, although we speak different languages. The willing to find something that is human and to celebrate humanity. That's it, I think. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much, Yael. And that was a real treat to listen to all of those things. I don't know if you want to stop your sharing so that we can see you on a bigger screen when I...
Of course, I'll do that gladly.
There you go. There you are. You mentioned the oud and also the Bedouin flute. Are there any other instruments that are particular to the cultures here, whether it be Bedouin, Druze, Circassian, or Israeli, that are unique to this area that have made their way into the larger jazz scene?
Yes, they have certain trumpets that they use. The jazz player use quite a lot. Oud is, of course, playing a big role in that scene. They don't use ney that much, I have to say, and I think these are more or less what I've came across with. But I have to mention what they do when they Omri Mo. Sometimes he tuned the piano as an Arabic piano, and that's a whole new thing in with this instrument, because a piano is definitely, it's not a string player that you can tune however you like, and I'll talk about the violin in a second. But tuning piano in an Arabic way is totally new. He's doing it. There's another colleague of mine who's doing it, but I think they're the only one who's doing it in Israel. I believe other people in the world do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're like pioneers of that technique. What they also use is, of course, strings, because violin, for example, is very much used in Arabic culture, but it's tuned differently than the Western violin. So violin, viola, cello, they definitely are tuned otherwise in an Arabic way, and they're used as well.
Okay, that's very interesting. And could you just tell us a bit more about the scene here, the jazz scene? How big is it? what does it mean for these people, Omer Avital and Avishai Cohen, to be recognized around the world? How does one, like the jazz scene here, how big is it? How does one go about learning jazz and making your way into the larger scene?
Well, I'm not a jazz musician myself, but I grew up with some of them, and I really do think that like the real musicians of our time, please don't quote me, but I always say it's the jazz players because they continue what started within the classical music, the improvisation. And the improvisation technique just went off in the beginning of the 20th century, and we had our own problems in the classical musical history. And the jazz players, I find them to be the most talented and developed musicians. That I have to say. Actually, the Israeli musicians, the jazz musician, they flourished in New York in the 90s. Both Omer Avital and Avishai Cohen made history in the 90s in New York. And I think that if you ask any jazz fan around the world, they would say that those names like opened their eyes. And they made themselves their names outside of Israel. And most of them don't even live here. Avishai Cohen lives here. Omer Avital was living here when we were studying together, but he went back to New York. I went to Baltimore. And Jonathan Avishai just recently came back here, but most of them don't even live here. Omri Mo not only lives here, but he lives in Jerusalem, which is fascinating because Jerusalem is very poor in terms of culture, but he refuses to go to live. He's very well based there and connected. And I can understand and relate to that. So their names are like worldwide, very, very famous. But the Israeli scene is actually interesting, but very, very, very small. Um, but there are stars anywhere they go. I mean, especially worldwide.
Now today, I know there's the Festival of the Oud and International Jazz Festival in Eilat and in Mitzpe Ramon. So, are there schools here where you can learn jazz, or you have to go overseas to?
No, they have a very, very good high school departments. They always had a very good one, both in Jerusalem, where Omri and I went to school together, and the Avishayim, most of them, they come from Talmud Yelin, another art high school, which is very, very developed and very, very good. So actually, there's a reason why they do it so well because actually they get a very good education here in Israel, both in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. You have like the best musicians ever when it comes to the jazz, and I think they proved it. We always had the jazz festival in Eilat, which is more, I would say, used to be more conservative. But both Avishai Cohen, the trumpet player, and both Avishai Cohen, the bass player, had run it during the last few years, rotation here and then. They're not doing it right now. But it used to be quite conservative, and ever since they got into the scene, it became much more wild and interesting in my eyes.
What do you think about jazz made it attractive for people in Israel to learn and to take that genre on, as
Wow,
opposed
I've never thought about it. It's really interesting. I really need to reflect on that one and to think about it. I think there is something in the Israeli mentality that craves for not being disciplined. And let's challenge this and let's check out this. And the doubt and the the willing maybe to check things out whether they really should be like this or maybe not. I think it's part of the Israeli mentality in a way. And I know from jazz players who are non-Israelis, they always say that there is something Israeli that is very outstanding in the way that Israeli players actually play. There is something unique in the temperament also of Israelis, because Israelis are, you can say a lot of things about it, but we're not lazy. And the temperament is very high to say the least. So, and jazz actually craves for that. Jazz needs it. Jazz needs this audacity. So I think it can connect with something in the Israeli mentality. Maybe there are some good things in that mentality, after all.
Okay, well, that was very like illuminating and also a treat to listen to this and get a window into the jazz scene in Israel. Can't wait for part 2 and part 3 of this series. Thank you so much, Yael.
Thank you all, and wish you a lovely day there where it's sane and nice and calm.